Hey, what's up guys, it's Kelly and today I'm sharing some spooky books to inspire your October TBRs. If you find yourself enjoying this video then please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, it really helps me out, and if you're new here and would like to see more of me then please subscribe. So I have separated these books into three categories. The first being books that don't really have anything supernatural at play but that are very dark and creepy. The second category is books that actually are not as dark but do have an element of magic or supernatural, something fantastical about them. And the last group is just your straight up traditional horror. I have quite a sizable stack to talk about, so without further ado I will get into them. So first up, just your straight up kind of dark and creepy books. We have Screenplay Joni Miles by Nick Baker. This is a book that I feel is severely underrated. It is quite old, but I feel like people should still read it because it's really good. This was probably one of the first like YA books that I read way back in the day. It was one that I just kind of inherited from my sister's book collections, and it's really good. It's about this girl called Joni Miles who is desperate to be a screenplay writer. She comes from kind of a Hollywood legacy family, but she's determined to prove that she is not a movie brat. She really just wants her life to be ordinary, but as she's writing these stories, these things keep happening in her life that kind of make her feel like her stories are coming true. So, you know, she writes a story about this woman who keeps getting younger instead of older, and then meets a woman who seems to be doing the same thing. She writes a story about a wartime evacuee and becomes convinced that this lady is her teacher, but things like that don't happen to ordinary people. So this is definitely not scary, but it does have quite a weird supernatural overtone to it. So if you're a little bit squeamish but you still want something a little dark and creepy just to get yourself in the mood, I would really recommend this. Next up we have a book that I spoke about a lot last year and the year before because it was one of the best books that I read in 2017, and that is Broken Branches by M. Jonathan Lee. I have done a full review of this if you want to hear my thoughts more in depth. This is about a man who grew up in a very isolated cottage with his family, and it seems like his family is cursed. You know, every generation of his family has had something really terrible happen to it while they've stayed at this cottage. He becomes obsessed with the idea of this curse and researching it and trying to figure out what is causing it, trying to get to the bottom of it. In the process of this, he isolates himself even more from the world, starts isolating himself from his wife, from his child, and as all these weird things start happening, and as you see flashbacks to previous things that have happened in the family, you really start to question along with him if this curse could possibly be real. It is very dark, very creepy, it's very sad at the end. It is a family drama but with deliciously dark, creepy, sinister overtones. Then we have one of my favourite books of all time, which is Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. I really love this book, as you guys probably know. This again has nothing supernatural at play but definitely has a creepy element to it. Like, the whole book is very dark, very gritty, but the only thing you have to worry about is if you're squeamish about violence and blood. I am sure that you all know the basic idea of Fight Club. There's this man who, in the book we never find out his name. He has a pretty good life, you know, has a nice apartment filled with nice things from IKEA, has a good job, but he's just really done with it. Like, there's just nothing in his life that excites him anymore until his apartment burns down and he is left with nothing. So he ends up going to stay with this random guy that he meets on the beach called Tyler Durden, and together they form Fight Club, which is literally just a club where guys go to fight. So they go to Fight Club, and that is the one time that they can feel alive, that they can feel like their life has some kind of purpose, some kind of meaning. It is a phenomenal book. I love the writing style, I love the themes of the book. It takes a really strong look at capitalism, at toxic masculinity, and it's just fantastic in every single way, and you should read it. Then last in this category we have We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver. This again, nothing supernatural, but definitely dark, definitely creepy, definitely on the disturbing side. This is like, if you want to see real evil, this book. This is about a woman called Eva who never really wanted to be a mother. She had a child because her husband really wanted a child and she felt like that was what was expected of her, and she kind of bowed to societal pressure, and this book shows why you should never do that, because she then gave birth to this child who she absolutely did not want to mother, and he grew up to kill 7 of his classmates and 2 of the people that worked at school. Yeah, a cafeteria worker and a teacher. This book is just like one of many, many reasons that you should not have children if you don't want them. Because yes, Kevin was very clearly psychologically disturbed, but with a bit more care and a bit more attention and a bit more love and security and safety, he most likely would not have snapped and killed a bunch of people. It is a very dark dive into the human psyche, both Eva's and Kevin's, and if you are looking for something very dark, very creepy, very sinister, but without any monsters, I would very much recommend this one. Moving on to our more fantastical and magical reads. None of these are scary exactly, but most of them have elements that are a bit dark, a bit creepy, a bit weird. So where the first category was for people who are not really into horror but are here for the Halloween aesthetic but without the supernatural elements, this is for people who also don't really like horror but are here for the Halloween aesthetic with the supernatural elements. So first up, I have a poetry collection to recommend to you, and that is The Melancholy Death of Oyster and Other Stories by Tim Burton. I love this book. I love these poems. I love Tim Burton. I love the writing. I love the illustrations. I have always loved Tim Burton's artwork. If you watch the special features on a lot of the DVDs of his movies, you get to see like a lot of the concept art that inspired the films. One of the things that I really enjoyed was when he made Alice in Wonderland, he and Johnny Depp both drew pictures of what they imagined the Hatter, their version of the Hatter, would look like, and they came out looking so similar. As a creative team, they're just amazing. And yes, if you are a fan of Tim Burton's films, I think that you will really enjoy his writing, and you should probably pick this up. It's more weird than creepy. Like, there's a poem about a lady who has sex with a blender and gives birth to like a robot child. There is some weird shit in here, but it's a really good time. Next up, I would really recommend The Adventures of Pinocchio, the original story by Carlo Collodi. This book, guys, is so good. So if you like the film, if you like the Disney film, you will probably enjoy this as well, but do not expect it to be light and fluffy. As with everything that Disney's adapted, the original story is a lot darker. Some stuff went down in this book and I was like, how are we calling this a children's story? This is not a children's book, but it's super good. The overall story is very much similar to the film, so I'm not going to bother to recap it for you, but there is just so much more to the story in the book form, and it is amazing. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Then we have 2 of my favourite middle grade books. So these are really, really not scary at all, but just so good and so heartwarming, but with lovely moments of darkness and creepiness and just all the good stuff. It's like the best combination of dark and all the warm and fuzzy feelings. So first up, we have Faraway Magic by Amy Wilson. I loved this book. Oh, Amy Wilson's writing is so lovely. This is about a girl called Angel who, her parents have died, she's gone to live with her aunt and uncle and is going to a new school. And she kind of just wants to get on with life, and like, she don't want to make friends, she just wants to live her life by herself. And there's another boy in her class called Bavar who also isn't really interested in making friends. He just kind of skulks around, avoids everyone avoids him because they're a little scared of him, because he has this weird aura about him, and Angel can see these kind of shadows that twist and writhe about him, and she is convinced that somehow these shadows and this magical aura that he has around him have to do with the death of her parents. This book is so wholesome and beautiful and lovely and touches on really important things like morality and does something being a monster give you the right to kill it? Does something being evil give you the right to kill it? Do we even have the right to decide if something's evil or not? It has all of these very complex themes packed into a middle grade book, and it handles them so well. And that's one of the things that I think makes it such a good multi-generational read. Like, it would be really good for kids, but it's one of those books that I think adults even almost get more out of, because it grapples with so many issues that are things that you grapple with more as an adult, but it comes in a way that's a lot easier to digest. This book is wonderful. It has scary monsters that come out of the sky, It has houses that make me think of the Addams Family. It has portraits of dead family members that talk and snark and make comments when they're not wanted. It is the perfect balance of funny and serious and light and dark and fluffy and heartwarming and wholesome and really, really creepy, and it is super good, and you are doing yourself a disservice if you don't read it. Which brings me to, I was going to say very probably, but almost definitely, my favourite middle grade book of all time, and that is Nevermoor by Jessica Townsend. How could I not? On a list of books that have delightfully dark and creepy aspects to them, how could I not talk about the girl that's cursed to die on her 11th birthday, but instead goes off to a magical land, which is somehow even more dangerous in conjunction with its wonder, where there's a giant talking cat, where she gets to ride around the city on an umbrella, where she has to pass 4 incredibly dangerous tasks using a talent that she doesn't have. This book also has an excellent Halloween scene. They call it Hallowmass in the book, but one of the trials takes place on Halloween, and it is so dark and like anxiety inducing, even though you know kind of that the characters have to get out of it safely. It still was a really tense moment for me. One of the things that I love about these books so much is that often when I read middle grade, I feel like there aren't any stakes. I'm never really worried for the characters because, you know, I just feel like middle grade has gone soft since I was a kid, and when I was a kid, you could be reading a book and suddenly the main character dies and it's just like, well kids, that's death. That's part of life. And now, you know, you have to be so careful about the messages that you send to children and not exposing them to scary things and dark things and bad things. Like, bad things are a part of life, let them learn about it in a book, you know? Scary things are a part of life, let them learn about it in a book. It's a safe space. Anyway, that's a rant for another day. This just felt like the kind of books that I read when I was a child, where there were no rules. You didn't have to worry about offending parents or scaring children too much. It was just a really, really good story with an excellent balance of life lessons about friendship and embracing who you are, but also really dark, sinister magic and creepy characters and really high stakes for the characters, where there were times where I was genuinely concerned that main characters were going to die, and I just don't get that feeling from a lot of other middle grade. I just can't recommend Nevermoor enough for the most wonderful, charming story, but definitely with very deliciously dark and creepy moments. I have one more book that actually I probably should have included in the first category, but I feel like it goes just as well here, and that is Sweeney Todd, which is written by pretty much an unknown author. There is a whole long prologue in the beginning of this book about how they kind of have suspicions about who wrote it, but they're not really sure who wrote it, and I'm not going to go into it because it's been a long time since I read this book, and the prologue really bored the pants off me even then, and I do not remember what conclusion they came to. If you're really interested, you know, when you find a copy of this book, you can read it. Sweeney Todd is one of my favourite Halloween movies. It's one of my favourite movies. I think we know by now I love Tim Burton, and I love musicals, so hello. This follows very much the same story as the film does. Sweeney Todd comes back after a long time of being wrongfully imprisoned and is determined to take revenge on Judge Turpin, who is the man who wrongfully imprisoned him, all because he had the hots for Sweeney's dear old wife, who is now dead. He then meets a woman called Mrs. Lovett, who has the worst pie shop in London, as she is, you know, very, very open about. And when Sweeney opens his barbering business, he discovers that he's got a pretty good way of making sure that she always has fresh meat for her pies. So yes, the book does follow the story of the film pretty closely, although the book does have a few extra storylines woven into it. It is a really good time. It is the perfect dark Halloween read. I mean, you know, London in the 1800s is just a good time to set a dark, creepy story, and this book was really good. What I will also say is it's not actually that scary, which is why, again, it probably should have been in the first category, although it definitely deals with massive depths of human evil and depravity. Really, killing people and baking them into pies is not the worst thing that you face in this book. But yeah, it's not, like, nothing about it is straight up horrific or gory. If you are very sensitive, you might, you know, be upset by some things, but it's not really that horrific. It's just dark and creepy and wonderful. So onto the proper horror books. These are books where there is most definitely some supernatural element at play, and on top of that, they are scary. I was not scared because I don't really get scared by things. Like, books don't scare me, movies don't scare me, but these are kind of considered traditional horror, and I consider them traditional horror. Starting off with Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin. If you watched my Owls wrap-up earlier this year, you will know that I really enjoyed this book. It was excellent. It was so much better than I was expecting even. This is about a woman called Rosemary who has just got married, life is going well, they've just moved into like their dream apartment, they have really nice neighbours, although they seem a little weird, and she falls pregnant. That's pretty much the entire storyline of the book. The rest of the book is just Rosemary being pregnant, and I can't really tell you much about the actual supernatural part of this because, spoilers. What I can tell you, because it's kind of widely known, is that she is carrying the Antichrist, essentially. I'm not going to go at all into how she comes to be carrying Satan's baby, but I will say that although there is definitely a supernatural element at play here, the scariest thing about this book is that most of the actual evil comes from just ordinary people. You can debate at length whether there's actually true evil in like a demonic sense in this book, but there is no denying that there are evil people in this book. And the scariest part is they're doing it because they're convinced that this is the right thing to do, which is always scary. It is a really good read, and it is perfect for October. Then you can't talk about horror and not talk about Stephen King. So my favourite book of his that I've read is The Shining. I read this last year in October for Kingtober and I loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. This is about a man called Jack Torrance who is an alcoholic and trying to recover, trying to stay off the juice, trying to get his life back on track and kind of keep his family together. He takes a job as the caretaker of the Overlook Hotel up in the mountains. No one else is going to be there, it's out of season. It is just going to be them in this hotel, and basically his job is just to go into the boiler room every day and like turn the valve to make sure that the boiler doesn't explode and therefore explode the whole hotel. His son Danny, however, is struggling a bit with staying at this hotel. Danny has always had kind of weird visions. He has an imaginary friend, and now that they've gone to the hotel, things are getting even stranger. His visions are getting worse. Something bigger than them definitely seems to be going on. In addition to that, they're the only people staying in the hotel, but there seems to be a woman in room 217. There are guests that they can hear going up and down the elevators. The bar is filled with the sounds of tinkling glass, so something is going down. The thing that I love about this book is that it combines actual supernatural elements with very intense mental illness. Jack really starts to descend into madness, and that is a lot scarier than anything that's happening in the hotel. People being the source of evil is a lot more scary to me than like evil being the source of evil, so this was a great time for me. I really enjoyed it and I highly recommend it. While we're on Stephen King, I mean, you can't talk about Stephen King and Halloween and not mention it, especially with the film coming out. I read it 2 years ago when part 1 came out. It was really good. It's not my favourite King. I think it's number 3 of the 4 that I've read, but I mean, still, they're all like 4 stars and up, so that's not a bad place to be. Yeah, it was really good. Killer clowns. What else do you need to say? What could be more perfect for Halloween, you know? Then lastly, I have a new release that I want to talk about. That is Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. This book, guys, was so good. I got an early copy at work and I was just blown away by it. It is super different to The Perks of Being a Wallflower, so I know everyone's really excited that after 20 years Stephen Chbosky's written a new book, but if you were expecting a follow-up to Perks, you're gonna be shook. It is very different. It is a whopping 700-page supernatural thriller. If you enjoyed it, I think you'll really enjoy Imaginary Friend as well. It also is very heavily focused on this group of kids in this small town who are seeing and hearing things that they don't really understand, and you as the reader are left questioning if something supernatural or sinister is actually afoot here, or if it's just that these kids are going crazy, because this madness seems to just be catching more and more people in the town. Basically, it's about a woman called Kate Reese who is escaping an abusive relationship, and she takes her son Christopher and takes him to this really small town far out of the way. She's convinced that no one is going to bother them there. She's convinced that here they can finally escape from her ex-boyfriend. And things are going well, you know, she gets a job and they're starting to get back on their feet when Christopher disappears into the woods and doesn't come out for 6 days. When he comes out, he seems unharmed. No one seems to have taken him into the woods. No one seems to have interacted with him when he was in the woods, except for this man he calls the nice man, who he eventually followed out of the woods to get back to his, you know, everyday life. So he seems unharmed, but he's definitely not unchanged. Suddenly, all of these things that he was struggling with at school, he can do perfectly. You know, he's really good at maths and he can read fine, when previously it definitely seemed like he was slightly dyslexic, and he just generally knows a lot more than he should know. And he knows that he can't, in some cases, really let this on, because the only thing that he can tell them if anyone asks how he knows these things is his imaginary friend told him. He and his friends have to go and build a treehouse in the middle of the woods, the same woods that he got lost in for 6 days, because the nice man tells him to. The nice man, who, by the way, is a plastic bag on a tree. The whole thing is just so wonderfully sinister. I saw a lot of reviews saying that the book was too long, that the action was too drawn out, and I can understand that criticism, although I don't agree with it. Yes, the moments of very intense action were quite spread out, but the thing that really amazed me about it was the way that Stephen Chbosky drew out that tension across the whole book. Like, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Like, yeah, it was a really long book, and actually, considering how long it was, not that much happened. There weren't that many key scenes. There were lots and lots and lots and lots of little scenes that together made one big important picture, but there weren't really that many pivotal moments, which you expect there to be in a book that's 700 pages, but he drew out that tension so well that I was on the edge of my seat for 700 pages. I was anxious for 700 pages. When I put that book down, I was anxious about the fact that I didn't know what was going to happen next. Like, I was on edge the whole time I was reading it. And if you can do that, like, you can make your books as long as you want, you know? Like, yes, it was long, but I was never bored. And where, with a book like it, there were moments that I felt were slightly unnecessary. Like, that book could have been 200 pages less and I don't think I would have noticed. With Imaginary Friend, although there probably are moments that could have been cut out, I never felt that way. While reading, I never thought, oh, I wish this book was a little bit shorter, or I don't really know if that scene was necessary. Everything felt important to me, everything felt necessary to me, and the whole thing was just amazing, and I'm ready for the movie adaptation because I think it's going to be great. Margot Robbie, I'm asking for her to play Kate. As I said, I don't really get scared by things, but I definitely felt the tension in this book, and I felt the anxiety, and that's enough for me. So those are some books that I would recommend that you read this October. I did try to kind of get a little something for everyone, you know, regardless of where you're at on the scaredy cat spectrum. If you have any other October recommendations, then please leave them down below, and also let me know. I was thinking of doing another video like this, but with my favourite books that have supernatural creatures in them, so vampires, werewolves, zombies. Let me know if you'd be keen to see that, and I'll try and get it up soon. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, if you enjoyed this, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you all again very soon. Bye!